Hi, I'm State Senator Bill Coley, and since you guys couldn't be with us here today, I'm from Butler County just like you, and I'm over here in Franklin County now, Columbus, Ohio, home of the Ohio Statehouse. And right now we're in the map room of the Ohio Statehouse, and you can see all 88 counties and how they lay out in the map of the state. And here at the Ohio Statehouse, we wanted to take you. We like to bring all the students from your school to the State House, and since we couldn't bring you with us here today, we thought we'd do a tour of the State House. And with me here today is my good friend Chris Matheney, and Chris is the site director and the historical director here, and he knows more about the State House than anybody else, I think. And he just knows everything. I learn stuff from him every time I'm with him. And so we thought a good place is, since not all of you are with us here today, we're going to sneak down into the little corner where the cornerstone is. The first thing, the building block that they laid first and then built the whole State House around us. So we're going to start there, and we thought it'd be really neat for you to see. So let's go down to the cornerstone. Okay, guys, now all the tour groups that came before you, they didn't get to see this. This is the light bulb room where they store all the light bulbs. Not too exciting, but it's close to someplace that is pretty interesting. So we're gonna walk over here and avoid some more of the light bulb stuff, and we're gonna walk down these stairs, and we're gonna remember to duck. And here is the cornerstone. And Chris, can you explain to them what this is?
Well, what you may or may not know about the Ohio Statehouse is this is actually the second state capitol to sit here on Capitol Square. There was always an idea, a plan to make something bigger and grander. In fact, that first state capitol sat on the corner of State and High, and they left the center of Capitol Square open as if they knew that they were going to build something bigger and grander, and indeed they did. And in 1837, the state legislature passed authorization to build this new state capitol. And you know, one of the first things they did was they held a contest. They sent out flyers to the state and to the nation saying, send us your drawings. Show us how you think the Ohio Statehouse should look. Now, there were a number of rules that went along with this contest, but perhaps the most important one was that it followed this Greek Revival style of architecture. When you think of the ancient Greeks, a number of things come to mind, but they're also known as the first democracy. Now, the first place winner, the architect who designed the first place winning design, he got the honor of being the first architect to work on the Ohio Statehouse. And essentially what he did, Senator, was to put in the foundation. So kind of another 15 feet down below where we're at now, they smoothed it out. They put down a slurry, a mixture of rock and concrete. And then they started dropping in huge pieces of Ohio limestone. The Ohio Statehouse is sheathed in Ohio limestone. But the strange thing is that after he got the foundation in, he promptly quit. We're not sure why he did it. Might have been politics, might have been disagreements over design, but he had it far enough along that on July 4th, 1839, they decided to lay the cornerstone. Now, if this was July 4th, 1839, we'd be outside. There'd be perhaps a marquee tent here for dignitaries. They had lots of activities for the citizens to come out. It's estimated that 5,000 citizens attended the laying of the cornerstone. The MC of the proceedings was a former Ohio governor and one of its earliest pioneers, Jeremiah Morrow. And he's the one that made remarks when the cornerstone was laid into place. Now, if you look right here, this is the cornerstone. We like to call it the corner coffin because it goes back about 7 feet 2 inches and it's about 3 feet 2 inches deep. Now, this is the bottom of the cornerstone, and this clank is the lid that goes on top of it. And what they did was they made an excavation in the lower stone. So what you may or may not know is it's actually a time capsule, and I just happen to have a list of what's inside. All right. The following deposits, securely packed in strong flint glass jars. Flint glass isn't like what we used to use flint glass. Flint glass has a high lead and mercury content, so we don't use it anymore. But in 1839, this was perfect. The following deposits, securely packed, again, in strong flint glass jars, were packed in an excavation in the lower stone. The Declaration of Independence, that's right. We have the Declaration of Independence right here at the Ohio Statehouse. No, I'm sure it was a copy from the gift shop. The constitutions of the United States and of the several 26 states, don't forget that this is 1839. The ordinance of 1787 for the government of the Northwest Territory. The statutes of Ohio. The Bible. The first two parts of the transactions of the Historical and Philosophical Society of Ohio. Specimens of the gold and silver coins of the United States. 150 newspapers of recent date, comprising those published in Ohio and in the chief cities of the Union. Several statistical works and periodicals, specimens of Ohio's agricultural and manufacturing productions. Reports of the state's institutions, the act of the Ohio legislature authorizing the building of the Capitol, a list of the officers of the government of the United States and of the several states, including the judiciary, a list of the members of the last and preceding legislatures of Ohio, everybody wanted in, the names of the State House commissioners, architect, and superintendent of masonry, as well as a list of the officers of the Corporation of Columbus. Now understand that before the cornerstone was laid in place, it was actually hung aloft in a harness. And they made a number of toasts that day. It's better 13 toasts to the cornerstone, and one of my favorites is this one. Emblematic of the great state of whose civic temple it is destined to be the support and ornament, gigantic in its magnitude, impregnable in its strength, enduring in its integrity. But the very best line that came out of the laying of the cornerstone came from Governor Jeremiah Morrow himself. This is what he had to say. Let the foundations be deep and strong. Let the materials be of nature's most lasting gifts, durable, imperishable. Let the edifice rise in solemn, simple grandeur, a monument of chaste and classic beauty. And may the lightnings of heaven, which scathe, and the whirlwind and storm, which prostrate the works of man, pass by and spare this house, erected by a mighty people and consecrated to social and constitutional government. I now lay the cornerstone of the capital of Ohio. Now, you'll learn, of course, that the Ohio Statehouse went through a renovation during the 90s. And the stories we hear about that, even before I came to work, was they had lost the cornerstone. And then they found it again here on the northeast corner of the Capitol. So people today say, Chris, you're the historic site manager, can we take those objects out? Well, the rule of thumb is that you can't open up a time capsule until the building's been destroyed or it's scheduled to be destroyed. Now, in 1992, they found again the location of the cornerstone. And if you look at the top portion right here and the bottom, you'll see that it's kind of been smoothed away. They used diamond bit sanders and ground it down, and they put ground penetrating radar onto the cornerstone, and it said they could make out the shadowy outline of objects. So all those objects that we went through, they've been sitting in there since July 4th, 1839. Again, an auspicious day to lay the cornerstone.
Now, Chris, they didn't run to Home Depot and just get a kit that said this is a state house. This took a lot of work and stuff. How did this get built?
Right. You know, the truth is, Senator, they started building in 1839. It didn't complete it until 1861. 22 years to complete. Now, there's a number of factors that made it take that long, like a cholera epidemic in Columbus at the time. But one good thing is they had a lot of manual labor in the form of prisoners from the state pen that they began to march over every day to help build the Ohio Statehouse. That former governor, Jeremiah Morrow, that handled the MC duties during the laying of the cornerstone, had this idea. The prisoners had just gotten finished dressing the stone of the Central Ohio Lunatic Asylum. So they had some skills. But there are places in the State House to this day where you can see perhaps where different chain gangs and different skill levels were put in place. Now, if you look at all this stone here, this is the original stone from the Ohio Statehouse. Now, it's been pointed up, as they say. There's been, it's been sealed up. But take a look at this rock selection. There are places throughout the State House where some of it is sort of haphazard in its choice, and then in some places it's very linear, as if somebody was standing over those prisoners and making sure that they placed the block. And speaking of prisoners, let's go meet one of them.
We're now over towards the studios where the Ohio Channel works, and where they work every day and help produce all the shows that come from the State House. Tell us what we're seeing here.
Well, this studio is a very high-tech studio, but we are still in what they call the crypt of the Ohio Statehouse. And crypt is just a fancy word for basement. And it's hard to imagine now among all this technology, but at one time, maybe what you would have heard down here was the chink, chink, chink of hammer on stone. And perhaps the sound of animals pulling some of those stone through here, and the sound of murmuring and conversations from the prisoners that were working in here as they're building up from the foundation. May I introduce prisoner Ephraim Badger. You can see his last name right here at the top, and this is a wonderful profile shot that he did of himself here while he was working at the Ohio Statehouse. Now, Ephraim Badger had been arrested for burglary, roughly right around 1846, 1847, and he repaid, I should say, his debt to society by coming here to work on the new Ohio Statehouse. He got out in 1849. It's our understanding that he married a girl, moved away to Cleveland, and was never heard from again.
Now, Chris, this is not a museum. This is a working building, and we're in right now one of the hearing rooms where, when we're working on legislation and people want to come and testify and tell us why the bill's a good idea or a bad idea, this is the room, one of the rooms that we meet in. But tell us what else is interesting about this room.
Well, you're right. The Ohio Statehouse is very much a working capital. In fact, we're the 8th longest and continuous working state houses in the country. But you can also see there's evidence from other time periods throughout the Ohio Statehouse. In fact, if you go to the corners here in the crypt all the way around, you can find inventory marks and dates from different time periods, and it kind of harkens back to the past. In fact, that reminds me, if you've ever watched TV through the night, sometimes you're skipping through the channels, and I've come across one of those ghost hunter shows, and you know how the ghost hunter shows usually go. That is, they'll build you up to this point that you think you're about to see something, and then they'll cut away to commercial. And when they come back, they're mostly like, "Oh my gosh, did you see that?" And you're left saying no. But I remember one night as I was scanning through it, they had some ghost hunters in Canada. And it was the standard setup that is that they would visit the site that was supposedly haunted during the day. In this case, I think it was a fort up in Canada. So they'd learn all the stories about it, learn the history, and then, of course, then they go away and they would come back and spend the night there. And so it was at the point in the show, we've all seen it before, where they're talking about how they're going to come back and spend the night in that haunted location. And so the interviewer was saying, "Well, what do you think our chances are?" And this young woman that was hosting the show said that she had 2 wonderful things that would make it perfect for that site to be haunted. One, there was a water source that went nearby, a river. And in fact, when I think about the Ohio Statehouse, of course, this Capitol Square was chosen partially for its proximity to the river, to the Scioto River. 2, you need the presence of limestone. She said that limestone attracts the spirits. The Ohio Statehouse, again, is sheathed in Ohio limestone. We're near the Scioto, and we've got limestone block that the Statehouse is built out of. And in fact, in the early 2000s, we had some ghost hunters come here and spend the night. And they did record sounds, and including sounds from this very room that we're in right now. And as I recall, you could hear the murmuring of voices that slowly rose a little louder. You could hear a gavel hitting a table or a wood block, and a voice that says, "All ye here," all recorded right here in this room.
Now, Chris, when we talk about Capitol Square, we're not talking about one building, are we?
No, and that's a good point, Senator. Most visitors, not all, but most who come to our Capitol, they think that we've just got one big building, but really we have 3. Now, technically, this is the Ohio Statehouse. This is what was begun in the year 1839 and wasn't finished until 1861. 22 years to complete, but when it was finished, second in size only to our U.S. Capitol and nearly as admired. Now,
this building on this side is the old Judiciary Annex that was built in 1901 to house the Ohio Supreme Court. They moved out of there, though, in 1974. And as you know, that's become the Senate building. It's the office place of our state senators, comes complete with a couple of hearing rooms on either end. And right where we're at now, this is the atrium, built in 1993 to connect these two buildings. But you know, as long as you're here right now, there is something about this particular location that has a lot of historical aspect, not only here in Ohio, but in our nation's history.
So Chris, President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, was actually right here.
He was. Of course, when he was here on this particular visit, he wasn't president yet. And when Lincoln first came here, it was in support of William Dennison, who was the Republican candidate for governor in Ohio in the year 1859. Now, when Lincoln came here, it was right after the Lincoln-Douglas debates, as we know those. And he was actually paid by a very young Republican Party to come back and give some of those speeches. And you can see the plaque here on the column. We know that he stood in this area, and we think he would have been up here. But you know, in 1859, this would have been the uppermost step, and the steps would have come down from here. So of course the atrium wasn't here, and the old Judiciary Annex wasn't here either. So it was kind of an open area, and when he was here on this particular day in 1859, he spoke to about 100. When Lincoln was here in 1859, he was actually here speaking in support of William Dennison, who was Republican candidate for governor. This was right after what we know as the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and Lincoln was traveling through Ohio speaking on his behalf. We also know that Douglas followed Lincoln around through Ohio speaking for the opposition, and in fact, most period newspapers will tell you that Douglas's speeches were wildly more popular. But if you were to look at a political map of Ohio in 1859, I don't know why you would, but if you did, you would find that it was all Democrat. This is the very beginnings of the Republican Party. You know what? There was a Cincinnati paper, though, that said that Lincoln was a man of passion and someone to watch. Interesting to note, William Dennison did indeed win the election that year, became Ohio's first Republican governor. And of course, Lincoln went on to become our first Republican president. But that wasn't Lincoln's only visit to the Ohio Statehouse.
Now, one thing about limestone, for you guys who like fossils and dinosaurs and things like that, limestone is made from things being in the water and then settling, and then they become stone over time. And so when you look at all this limestone, you see all of these fossils that were at one time alive, and then they settled in to the muck, and as that cured over time, it became fossils inside a limestone. And we get to see this every day here at the State House. You guys have seen, I think, the Daffy Duck for President cartoon, and we've talked about sometimes how a bill becomes a law, and how when it's originally typed up and it's given over to the clerk's office, and then it goes through the committee hearings, and then the big day comes and we're on the floor of the Ohio Senate. Well, this is my seat, and this is where I sit, and this is my desk. And here, I'll show you. It's kind of messy, but this is where I just, when I write down notes and ideas and all the extra stuff that I have, I kind of keep it over here. It's kind of messy, but it's all right. But this is where I sit when we're in session, and all 33 senators sit right in this room together. And when we want to talk about a bill, and when the clerk calls our bill up, we press our button here to let the Senate President know that we want to talk about a bill, and then his screen, and we'll go up there and I'll show you what happens on his screen. That'll come on. If we have an amendment, we press the white button and the amendment, and we tell the President we want to offer an amendment to a bill. If we left something in our office, I forgot to bring it, I left it on my desk inside my office, I'll press the blue button, and that tells the person who's in charge of all the pages that work here at the Ohio Statehouse, it tells them I need one of the pages to come over and talk to me, and I need them to go run an errand for me. But then once we get up, and if we're called on to speak about a bill, we just stand up, we take our microphone, and we tell the other members of the Senate why the bill is a good idea or a bad idea. But I thought you might want to see where everybody up front is working. So we're going to walk up here to the front of the Ohio Senate, and this is a pretty impressive place to be. You'll see right here is where the Senate clerk, he stands right here, and he's the one who reads. I swear this guy could be an auctioneer, he reads so fast. But this is where he works. And then he has two assistant clerks that help him keep everything moving, and they keep track of who wants to speak and how to turn the microphones on and turn them off, and who's got bills and amendments, and they have to keep track of all of that. But up here is where the president sits. Now, we start every session with a prayer, and that's typically done by a priest or a church elder or a minister or a rabbi. They'll sit right here on the couch, and then they'll get called up by the Senate president. And the Senate president sits up here, and he'll bang the gavel, and it will be, and that'll call the Senate to session, and then he'll invite the minister up to say the prayer. And when we're done saying the prayer, we turn and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll get down to work. And this is where it's all coordinated from up here with the Senate president. And whenever we want to speak, we press our button, and one of the computer screens will light up and say, Senator Coley wants to speak, or Senator Hoagland wants to speak. And the president will call on whomever he decides should speak next, and then the clerks will turn on their microphones, and they'll say what they have to say, and then they'll sit back down. And then when the president is satisfied that everybody's had a chance to speak, he'll say the clerk will call the roll, and then the clerk will call all 33 names in order. And he'll call them all in order, and we'll all vote, and we'll say yes or no. And 33 senators, that means we have to have 17 senators vote yes to pass a bill. And if the governor were to veto a bill, and we wanted to override a veto, it would take 20 senators to vote to override a veto. This is where it all happens, and this is the room that we all meet in. Sometimes we're here for 45 minutes to an hour, and sometimes we're here 7 or 8 hours. It's not uncommon for sessions to last a very, very long time. When you come to see the Ohio Senate in action, this is the room you come to. And it's open to anyone that wants to come. It's open for a public meeting, and anyone who wants to visit us and watch us do what we do up here is welcome to come, and they sit in the black benches or the white chairs that sit on either side. Now, all of our guests have to stay outside the railing. They're not allowed inside the railing, but as long as they stay out there, they can come and watch the Senate in action. Now, over in that corner there is the members' lounge. Okay, now some days, if we're here 5, 6, 8 hours, that can be a long time. You're probably not going to be able to just sit on the floor the whole time. And that's why we have right here, right off the main floor, is the Senate members' lounge. And this is kind of like where we hang out when it's a really, really long session and we need to go get a drink of water. And this is where we go to just get off the floor for a moment, collect our thoughts, and maybe make a phone call to our office or check on some stuff and help write a speech. And before I was a senator, I was a member of the House of Representatives, and the one area that always kind of joined the House and the Senate is the Rotunda. It's right, physically it's right in the middle, and it's also a common meeting place for senators and members of the House of Representatives to kind of get together and talk. So tell me about this place.
Indeed, no room is more symbolic, no room is more important to the people than the Rotunda, and I'll explain why. You know, we talked earlier today about how the Ohio Statehouse went through a renovation, and you wouldn't believe what this place used to look like. It's so quiet today, Senator, in the Rotunda of the Ohio Statehouse, and we're not used to this. You know, normally during the month of April we have thousands of students that come in here, and by and large, we get a lot of fourth grade groups. And I'll never forget, we had a fourth grade group that one year when they came in and they looked up and they saw this, some of them thought that it kind of looks like Barbie's dream house. And I could see where that comes from. The State House has gone through a number of changes. And during the renovation of the Ohio Statehouse, the idea was to get it back to its 1861 appearance. Now, when I first started working here in 1994, it looked a whole lot different. Everything in here, the rotunda, had been painted over gray. In these niches, that's what you call these cutaway spots, were old murals with Americana themes of justice and agriculture. The glass was no longer in the top. It was plugged with a canvas state seal, so no sunlight was penetrating down in. It was dark, it was dusty. And then we started the renovation. And one of the first things done during the renovation were called bowl cuts. And bowl cuts can be any size and as small as your thumb. Hundreds of these cuts throughout the Capitol, and that's where you cut through all the different layers of paint. 36 layers in this room alone, to find out what was the original color or colors, and this was it. Now, there's a number of reasons for the colors that you see here, but a lot of these have to do with the diggings that were taking place in Pompeii. You know the story of Pompeii, right? 79 AD, a Roman village at the foot of a volcano, of all places. But of course, that volcano, Mount Vesuvius, erupts. All those people horribly killed. From a history nerd standpoint, pretty cool, right? Because everything underneath that ash and lava was preserved. They rediscovered Pompeii in the early 1700s. And by the time period of this building, the mid-1800s, we're quite familiar with the colors coming off of those ancient Roman walls. So when you see the colors and the decorations in here, understand that they've been inspired by ancient Rome. Lots of basic symbols. For example, it's 128 feet from the floor to the top of the rotunda, but we have high ceilings here for lofty ideas in government. We have stone floors for a strong foundation in government. But this is the best symbol of all. Now, when the Ohio Statehouse was first complete in 1861, it came with a place for the Senate. As you know, the Senate chambers are just up those stairs and to the right. And that other group of lawmakers, the House of Representatives, they're on this side and to the left. So our legislative branch was here. Just down those stairs and to the left is the governor's office in the cabinet room. So the executive branch was here. And believe it or not, in 1861, when the Ohio Statehouse was first complete, the Supreme Court was in this building as well, our judicial branch. We had all three branches of government in one building, which doesn't happen today, but that was part of the original plan, and I've still left something out, and that's this room. You see, the rotunda is known as the people's room, between all these branches of government. Symbolically, it's bathed in sunlight to give light to the voice of the people. This is a stone temple of democracy. Now, I told you about Abraham Lincoln speaking out there in 1859. He was here twice more. His second visit was in February of 1861. He'd just been elected president. He was on his way to Washington to be sworn in. He stopped here, spoke up in the House chambers. It was a joint session. You had the House, the Senate, and in this case, all the public they could cram inside. When he was done talking, they partied. They held a ball here, a dance in his honor. And it was during those times that a bust of Lincoln was made by a local man. Thomas Dow Jones from Granville, Ohio, made that bust of Lincoln. And you know, we've learned some things recently about our Lincoln bust, and if you think about it, in the early to mid-19th century, about the only way to get a selfie was to be painted or sculpted. And this particular Lincoln selfie captured him right after his beard came in all the way. Have you heard the story, Senator, about why Abraham Lincoln grew his beard?
Well, I have, but some of the students might not have.
Right. A little girl wrote him a letter, said that his face was too skinny and he needed to grow that beard. So we always like to point out that when Lincoln was here in 1859, he was kind of the young Lincoln. But when he came back in 1861, he was rocking the beard. Now, President Lincoln's last visit here was on April 29th, 1865. What brought him back that last time, Senator?
Well, that was after the war and after Ford's Theater, wasn't it?
Right. And what happened to our 16th president at Ford's Theater?
He was assassinated.
He was assassinated, right. So they placed President Lincoln's body in a coffin in Washington, and that coffin was placed on a funeral train. And that funeral train was stopping at a number of cities on its way west to his home state of Illinois. So, of course, President Lincoln isn't buried here. But his body lay right here in the Rotunda on April 29th, 1865 for 8 hours. 50,000 people from the state of Ohio came up from the west steps, passed by the body here, and went out through those east doors. And again, placed President Lincoln here because this is the people's room. This is also the same spot that in December of 2016, former Ohio astronaut and Senator John Glenn also lay in repose.
Now, Chris, I promised these students that they'd get to see the cupola, the very top of the State House.
Senator, I want to help you, but look, they've taken our ladder away from the door, so let's see what we've got.
Do we have anything we want to show them the state?
Well, it's going to be a little short, but I think we ought to be able to manage climbing up in there. So, of course, you recall, senators, it's kind of like this. You get on the steps, and you come up like this. Of course, we're teasing, aren't we? This
Yes.
isn't the way up to the cupola, but most people want to know about this door that's halfway up the wall. And what you may or may not know is that when the Ohio Statehouse was first complete in 1861, it came complete with gas lights. All the lights in the Statehouse have been made to look like the old gas lights. We had a forced central heating, didn't we, Senator? Downstairs in the crypt, there were 4 large boilers connected to 18 air chambers around the building, like a forced air system. And we have a newspaper account from February of 1856, 5 years before the building was complete, that said the temperature in the Statehouse rose to a comfortable 60 degrees. And we have working water closets. What's a water closet, Senator? You remember?
Well, I think we call those toilets, don't we?
Yeah, it's an old style bathroom. Now, I'm not going to show you a bathroom, but I'm going to show you how they make it work. If you look back through this doorway, you're going to see this old riveted tank. That's a cistern, and it held 800 barrels of water. And basically, it was a gravity-fed system down through the Statehouse. You can see the old brick door frame here. In fact, if you were coming in, you actually come down a couple of steps. We think that when this was active, there was either a set of stairs here or a ladder for the workers to have access. Heck, even those boilers, if they ran out of water down in the crypt, they had a hose hooked up to this that they could pump water out of it. That is a real live mid-19th century American-made product.
Now, Chris, we've walked 177 steps all the way up to the top. And I noticed there's all these signatures on this. Is this something new where people just started signing on the wall here?
It is fairly new. You know, in 1994, the renovation of the State House was far enough along that Senator Richard Finan, sort of from down in your neck of the woods, he's the one that led the renovation. He started letting folks come up here and sign their names. But really and truly, here in the observation deck, the oldest signatures or graffiti are on the bench itself. In fact, we found the oldest signature right here so far. J. Cook carved his or her name in the year 1870. And I always like to point out that 1870 was the year that the Ohio State University was founded. You know, the Ohio Statehouse was popular for a long time for a number of reasons. And you know what? It was the tallest building in Columbus until 1901. Now, Senator, I don't know what it's like where you live, but where I live down in the foothills of the Appalachia, it kind of rolls and goes like this. But up here in Columbus, it's as flat as a pancake. And you can kind of see the view that they once had. If you look out the windows between the buildings, you can see how many miles they could look into the distance, except of course then it was all the way around. This is one of the great things that we have here. We have this mid to late 19th century Greek Revival Ohio Statehouse right in the middle of this late 20th and early 21st century city.
Well, guys, I thought we'd end the tour at one of my favorite places at Cap Square, and that's here in my office in the Ohio Senate building. And you come in, and we usually can't bring all the students back here, but since it's just us on video today, I thought it'd be good if you guys got to come back and see my office. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, honey.
And
Welcome back.
this is my office, and this is, as you guys know, this is my wife, Carolyn.
Hello.
This is the chair that Carolyn got me when I was in the House of Representatives, and I've had it ever since. And this is where I work all day. Now, Carolyn, what if these students want to learn more or come and see more about the State House?
We would love to have you and your family come up and see us. We can take you on a tour, maybe do some lunch. We can look at all the hot spots that you saw today for the most part. And the best thing is you get to touch everything, because this is a working building. It's not a museum. So you get to have fun and really enjoy your time here. So your teachers will have my cell phone and my email, and we would love to entertain you and your family. You can even come up now while there's a break. But we have to practice social distance, and we need to keep small groups. So think about that, and we would love to see you, and maybe we'll see you this summer. Take care.
Thanks for taking the tour. Take care.